why do we actually rebalance? I wanted to we broke this actually into the reasons you would rebalance. And the first one was implementing changes to your investment objectives. Now that sounds like a very fancy textbook type definition. What does that actually mean,
Well,
Bo?
it's really interesting, Brian. We were talking about this in show prep. Like, what's a really good way to lay this out? And when you think about investing, most folks who come to investing, we said, really have sort of two goals, right? Your goal is either to get rich, to build wealth, to become wealthy, or if you've already accomplished that, your goal is to stay wealthy. And the answer to where you fall on that will affect the way that you allocate your portfolio and ultimately why you rebalance and how you rebalance through time.
So let me put some numbers on this to kind of give people some context. When you're in your 20s and you have not a lot of resources because you're just starting the journey of building wealth, it's not uncommon that you might have 80 to even 90% of your money working on get wealthy.
Build wealth.
Only 10% of it is probably at the stay wealthy or not be poor, because you're all about the being aggressive to reach your goal. Because what do you have to lose? I mean, because typically if you're starting from zero, you can be super aggressive because you have not much to lose and you have lots of time to let it kind of absorb and work through there. But keep in mind, getting wealthy versus staying wealthy versus, think about the person who's actually reached a level of success. You guys know I share this data point all the time. I was talking to my daughter about this. You're like, man, what a weird father that this is what you talk about at Cracker Barrel with your daughter. But I was talking to her about how it's so unfortunate that the stat of 70% of wealth, meaning millionaires, 70% of it disintegrates in the second generation, meaning the kids of the millionaires, 90% by third generation, meaning the grandkids of the millionaire. Typically, it's gone. The process completely recycles. So there is a change in your mindset that should happen once you build wealth. Figure out where's enough. Where is let's change the allocation to where now when I'm in my 60s or 70s, it might be 70% of my portfolio needs to reflect stay wealthy, or meaning not be poor, versus 30% is going to be get wealthy, because that's the part that's hopefully going to work and get you through retirement by still growing in the background. Pay attention to those things. They're two different objectives and they work differently in your portfolio.
And so what's interesting is as that goal shifts from just getting wealthy to figuring out how to stay wealthy, what most often happens for us is that our appetite for risk changes. While we're in that, I really want to get wealthy phase, I have a high tolerance for risk. I want to be aggressive. I want my portfolio to be out there. But as I begin approaching retirement, my appetite for risks begins to decline. And as I get into retirement, it drops even more. And then once I'm in retirement, once I'm living off of these dollars, I care less about how much my portfolio is going up and down and how much it's growing. And I care more about the stability of the value of the portfolio. So as you move through moving in those two goals, I want to get wealthy, I want to stay wealthy, our appetite, the way that we want to approach risk naturally changes. Well, inside of our portfolio, we have to make sure that that's reflected.
Yeah, and it also impacts your stage of life. I mean, this shows it in a lot of ways, and we could have easily put ages underneath this as well, is because I know when you're in your 20s, you're kind of in that gladiator phase of your life where you want to conquer the world, you can take those risks because your risk tolerance can be extra large. Meanwhile, you get a little bit older, a little more wisdom under you, and you've built some assets up. It's not uncommon, especially post 40, where you're no longer in that gladiator conquer the world. You're kind of thinking about, you're much more of a thinker. There's more wisdom there, and that mellows you out. Your portfolio should reflect that as well.
And so what we do is rebalancing allows a natural mechanism for us to do this. Now, you've probably heard us talk about this a lot, but we love target date retirement funds, target date index funds, because they paint a very clear picture of what should naturally happen in your portfolio. We went and pulled some sample glide paths. Now, these are from age 20 to age 75 based on the Schwab target retirement indices. And you can see for someone who's 20, it is a heavy equity allocation. It is going to be very, very aggressive. But as someone moves along their life cycle, as they get closer to age 55, 60, 65, 70, their appetite for risk decreases. So the amount of risk inside of their portfolio should decrease. Now, some of the people in the chat, Brian, are already saying, hey, but just because you're retired doesn't mean you should be completely conservative. Doesn't mean that you should take all the risk off the table. And that's entirely true. However, we would argue that a retiree living off of their portfolio should have a portfolio that looks different than someone who's just starting out in their career. And the way that you get from one point to another is through this process that we call systematic rebalancing.
Yeah, and it's going to change. And I love that we're going to share the tool that helps make this glide path more possible. I mean, it actually gives a process or procedure where you're not just stuck with the same asset allocation when you're starting at age 23 all the way through 65. By the way, if you want to impress when you go to the next party, just be like, oh, yes, I love Target Retirement Index Fund varieties because have you seen their glide path? You're going to be so impressed because they're going to be like, glide path? That's the coolest word I've ever heard. So now you've heard it. We didn't give you the definition because we wanted to first kind of hook you, see the visual of this, what is a glide path, but it does tie back, and Bo's exactly right. We love these index target retirement funds because really you only have to do two things while you're in the beginning of your journey. How much can I save? When do I need it? I don't have to focus any calories from my mind on anything else while I'm in the building process. Now, in a minute, we're going to share why this changes later as you get to more wealth, you reach a critical mass or that bowling point that I talk about. You don't have to do that while you're in the beginning. Just think about focus on what you can save, when you need it. Let the rest of this just be an education that you'll use at a later point.